Hey everyone, Jawad here with Hit the Apex podcast. How are we all doing this week? You know what week it is. It's been all over social media. Yeah, it's pay week. No, it's pay week for me, but yeah, we know it's race week. I thought I'd just slide that in there because of how many times I've seen it's race week on social media. But yeah, I did get paid too this week, which is pretty exciting. Don't know what's more exciting, race week or pay week, but you know, I'm sure you can understand. Anyway, hope everyone's doing well. At the time of recording today on Friday, it's just under 7 hours till the first practice session in Austria. And it's just so many feelings, you know, and I think excitement definitely is the best way to describe it. But there's also a sense of, you know, a hollow feeling too, because we're so used to, or I am at least, used to F1 starting off in Australia. And of course, we were here back in March, bit of a false start, had the cancellation Friday the 13th, being on the ground and covering that, as I said, for the last few months, you know, an experience I'll never forget. And the fact that, you know, this is the first time I've gone to a Grand Prix in Melbourne and there's been no racing at all. Formula One car didn't even turn a wheel, apart from the two-seater F1 Experiences car. So yeah, that's about it. But all going to talk about all about racing today. It's been exciting, the build-up, seeing so many people jump on board, start, you know, creating content, previews, and all sorts of stuff as well. I got back into, not that I had stopped in the meantime, but wrote a bit of a preview piece for the Raw.com as well this week, kind of asking 5 key questions about the World Championship this year as a whole, what to expect. So I will go off those a little bit later as well, do a Austria-specific preview, and also Supercars. We had the Sydney SuperSprint last weekend, Sydney Motorsport Park. I almost said an expletive there. I'm trying to keep this show without expletives, you know, because I do have a habit of going a bit off it sometimes. But yeah, no, it was amazing. The racing that we saw, you know, it just, you know, justifies the time that we've spent away. You know, you've had this urge, you've had this craving to see racing again, live racing that is, and then what they put on there at Eastern Creek was just, yeah, something else. So I'll do a bit of a wrap of that a bit later too. So yeah, Austria for first practice today. So no real changes to the format for the weekend. So we've got the usual 90-minute practice sessions on Friday, then a 1-hour practice session Saturday. Qualifying's the same, Q1, Q2, Q3, and then of course the race on Sunday. Though the biggest changes, I guess, is just the way that everyone's going about everything there. You've got bubbles within bubbles, you know, kind of like a bubble inception over there in the paddock now. You know, teams are to be in their own bubbles, so not really interacting with other teams or, you know, with the media as well. Just social distancing measures in place very strictly everywhere. I've seen all the F1.com preview videos so far that they released overnight here, and, you know, everyone's wearing masks. You know, the interviews are being done with a 2-meter gap. You know, they're using Zoom, things like that, to do interviews with journalists and stuff that are not actually at the track. Again, you know, they've only allowed you know, a select amount of media, press and, you know, written media to be there. Photographers, I think there's only like 5 on hand or something as well. So it's a very, very, you know, very select group of people. And of course with the teams too, only having a limited amount of staff on site too, which we saw with the supercars over there at Sydney as well, which I'll detail a bit later in a bit more depth. But yeah, you know, no gin palaces either. I kind of like that term, gin palace, now that Ross Brawn kind of coined when referring to teams and their luxury motorhomes and everything. So the drivers kind of just get their own little personal box, for demountable or something like that, using circuit infrastructure as well. So yeah, quite a few measures in place, and this is going to be the new normal. Again, something I talked about with the supercars as well. We're going to have to get used to it. It's the new normal. There's going to be no podium ceremony, of course. Instead, I think the top three are going to form on the grid, all spaced out, and they'll collect their trophies there, basically, which is, again, what we saw in Sydney. So now we can get to the nitty-gritty stuff and actually talk about what we normally talk about on a race weekend with our previews on this podcast. So obviously, not having turned a wheel since testing this year, there's no real spec car for the teams to be locked into. So, of course, you could have expected upgrades to have been brought. Mercedes, in quotation marks, brought a chunk of updates, which I'm sure will be sending shivers down the spines of their opposition. Renault as well, who really need a good year this year, will have quite a few upgrades. And then Honda as well. Power unit wise, they've brought a significant upgrade for both Red Bull and AlphaTauri. So those guys obviously going for a third consecutive win at this circuit. It's their home circuit, the Red Bull Ring. Max Verstappen, great form, going for a third consecutive win. And any extra bit of power, reliability is going to help you around here when you look at the splits, sector splits and everything. It's majority of the track is straights, and you're going to need some good power delivery to get a good lap time there. So, and yeah, we're going to have some weather as well, I believe, for practice today. It's kind of like what's going on behind me outside today. Very rainy, very cold, but I don't think it'll be cold over there in Austria. So, but that's only going to be there for Friday, we hope. The forecast for the rest of the weekend at the Red Bull Ring looks pretty good. So, hopefully we get a dry race, dry qualifying. Ferrari, I guess the big thing with them is that they're not going to have any upgrades till Hungary. They're going to bring a whole new car basically to Hungary. No upgrades for this race. So you've got Charles Leclerc, who's pretty much already said that, we're not going to be in the fight, being very honest about it too. Kind of hard to take him seriously a little bit, because I could just picture him in his banana outfit. Probably one of the best things to come out of the F1 virtual racing series, seeing Leclerc in a banana suit. But hey, as they were saying on Will Buxton and Lawrence Barretto were saying on I forgot what it was called. They started a new digital show on YouTube. They had a new title for it. I'll just refer to it as Paddock Pass because that's what we know Buxton does really well. It's good to see those guys doing their jobs again back at a track. It is really good feeling. But yeah, no, saying that it's basically kind of a new look for Ferrari that, previously you'd be very reserved, very you wouldn't really show much of a personality, but instead we've got this guy now, 22-year-old race winner, potential world champion, future world champion, dressing up in a banana suit and streaming on Twitch. So, how good is that? You wouldn't have seen that back in the 2000s or the even, when Fernando Alonso was there, 2010 onwards. So big cultural shift. And speaking of that, I haven't been silent about, what Lewis Hamilton has been doing. It's been fantastic. And, how basically the entire sport has united behind him for the Black Lives Matter cause. And his Mercedes team as well. They've gone, a step further by changing the livery of their car. So gone as the Silver Arrows. They've gone for a completely black livery, which, A, looks pretty sick. But B, also, just the message that sends as well, like, while you can't really change the past, and I know that, let's call them the SJWs, will come out on social media and say, Mercedes, they've got such a checkered past, or they've got such a dirty past, or whatever, they did this, they did that, back in, 19 whatever. But yeah, you can't change what's already happened in the past, but what they are doing to in the present, and for the future is what should be taken on board and, digested that way. So, yeah, black car for both the Mercedes drivers. Hamilton with a helmet change as well, really cool design. Bottas, same thing, helmet change. They're all going to be those two are going to be racing in black overalls as well, obviously with the Mercedes branding still on it. But yeah, it's just an important message that, they're sending, not only as a team, but just as a whole industry. And this whole idea about, you shouldn't mix politics and sport. Well, racism is not political, and I'm not going to say that's unfortunate for all those people who want to bring that topic of discussion up. It's not political. It is something that, should not even exist. We're here in 2020, and yet, it's still something that is continuously, such a divisive thing for us as a society. So the work that F1 is doing now, and all the teams as well that have got behind the cause, all the drivers, it is absolutely fantastic. I love the new livery on the McLaren as well. Getting behind the hashtag #WeRaceAs1, just the little rainbow lines on the side pods, which I think Lando Norris actually leaked when he was doing a Twitch stream in the pit lane on, I think it was Wednesday night or something, or Tuesday night when they got there. McLaren hadn't actually put out the the renders yet online, but one of my mates, he linked me to the Twitch stream. It was laggy as hell, but it was still pretty fun to see those guys, the McLaren team back in the pit lane doing their setup work and everything. And, I just caught a glimpse of these, the side pods with the blue and whatever sponsor they have on there, and then these rainbow lines, and I'm like, ooh, is that new? And then I think 20 minutes later or something, refreshing the Twitter feed, you see this all-new livery for McLaren, and I'm like, yes. And then I think WTF1 or something posted later on that Lando just leaked the McLaren livery. So very funny, and it's good, we get all those shenanigans, the Lando Norris shenanigans back. And how cool will it be next year when he's partnering Daniel Ricciardo, when Daniel Ricciardo will be partnering him? They're just such laid-back, larrikin-type troublemakers, and I think, it's going to be real fun. But we've still got this whole season in 2020 to go through, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Also a livery change for Williams as well, which was due after they had their split with their title sponsor Rocket, so a bit more of a simple livery, but a very, very elegant livery, I could say, more like an early 2000s Williams livery, white with a blue, and then I think a raft of sponsors, I think they've been rearranged on there that have been brought through by their driver, Nicholas Latifi, who, let's just quickly talk about Latifi, because he cops a lot of flack, I reckon, for no reason, or, well, not for no reason, but, because he's seen as a paid driver. But I reckon he is rather underrated, because when you listen to, George Russell or Alex Albon, who have raced with him before in the junior formulas and in Formula 2 as well, Latifi is no slouch, and of course he's the reigning F2 champion after last year. And, when you look at last year's F2 championship, it's not like there wasn't a strong grid there. You had Nick de Vries there, who obviously races for Mercedes in Formula E now, who finished runner-up. So the competition was strong, and I reckon, we might be able to see a surprise from Latifi this year. Not that I'm saying that he is, better than George Russell or anything. George is, one of those once in a blue moon kind of drivers too. But, I don't think Latifi's going to be a pushover, and this whole perception about him because of his father's fortune and investments and all that sort of stuff, I think is a bit, just a bit unnecessary. So, let him do the talking on track, which, he himself has already said in the previews that he feels a lot more comfortable this weekend in Austria because it's a track that he's already raced at before, he's been successful at in F2. So different to, say, when the season would have started off in Melbourne, at a track he's never ever driven probably, on a simulator or something, that's it. But never ever raced that. So, yeah, a bit more comfortable for him this weekend. And good luck to Williams too, because, they're going to need it this year. And hopefully we do see some good results come from that. And there will be a bit more on them when I get to those 5 key questions later on for the season. Pirelli tyres as well going to work a bit differently this year because of all the changes and everything. So now, rather than teams basically sending in their preferences for how many of each compound that they want for each race, and they usually have to do that like 8 weeks or something in advance, every race is going to see every driver get the same amount of sets of tyres. So in total, you've got 13 sets of tyres per driver for every race. There'll be 8 softs, 3 mediums, and 2 hard tyres. The compounds for Austria, they're not going to change them between the 2 weekends. So you've got the C2, C3, and C4 tyres available for this weekend and the next one, because remember, we got 3 weeks back to back of F1 coming. It's wall-to-wall F1, which is, I think, for all those people who've, missed it, I think, maybe 3 weekends in a row, they'll be like, my social life is completely... Not that, many of us have a social life anyway at the moment due to lockdown and all that sort of stuff, which I'll get to that again a bit later as well, about, lockdown over here in Melbourne again specifically. Thank you to all the people who live outside of Victoria and want to kindly give us a bit of flack about it, because I don't think you understand quite as well, how it's working and, all that. But more on that a bit later. So same sets of tyres for everyone, which will be good. But, if that kind of cancels out the variability of strategy and everything, who knows? But I still think we should be in for some good racing, even with those sets of tyres. You should see at a track like Austria, soft tyre, start off on that and then stop for a set of mediums. That's pretty much it. So, track surface there isn't too bad. So, just keep off the curbs basically, because they do bite, as we've seen in the past. And I think Danny Kvyat's one who's kind of had a couple of unfortunate run-ins with those big curbs. So, yeah, just stay off them. I think that'd be a good thing. And as I said before, Verstappen chasing a hat-trick there. Mercedes last year, they famously struggled with their cooling. Don't think it's going to be as hot this weekend over there than it was last year. But again, Mercedes have made several improvements to their car for this year compared to last. So don't rule them out at all, even though we talk about how the first 3 races that we're going to, Austria, 2 races Austria, then Hungary, that it favours Red Bull a bit more, but given their success there in the past, I think Mercedes could easily, with the form that we saw in testing, could come out and, pole position race win this weekend. Same story next weekend when we're there. And when you look at both the drivers' own records here, because we've only been racing here since 2014 in this modern era, they've got similar record. So Lewis Hamilton, 3 podiums, 1 win, including 1 win, I should say, and 2 pole positions. Valtteri Bottas, 3 wins including 3 podiums including 1 win and 2 pole positions as well. So equal results, and you could say, Bottas has probably looked more comfortable here than Hamilton in the past. Hamilton, he kind of stole the win in 2016 from his teammate Nico Rosberg. That was fun rewatching that race again, and that's been another highlight of the lockdown is YouTube. They've been able to put up some of those old races, so exciting to see that. And, I guess Nico left a bit... I don't know, what would you say? He's got egg on his face, I think, with the way he... tried to defend his line, and Lewis basically had nowhere else to go, but ended up on top and won. And yeah, Rosberg not even on the podium at the end of that one. So there you go. But when you look at this and Bottas's record here, it's a chance for Valtteri to get a good start to the championship, because we don't know how many races we're going to have this year. We so far are locked into 8 as a minimum. If it ends up just being the 8, which you hope is not the case, you hope that the other countries that we want to go to for the championship get on top of their COVID cases and it's safe to travel again internationally. But, not just for Bottas, but for any driver who wants to challenge Hamilton for the championship, they're going to have to get a good start. Verstappen to get a good start, get those points in the bank early, get the lead of the championship early, because that's going to be the crucial thing. As far as, championship predictions are concerned, well, I'll detail it a bit more later, but I reckon, it's Hamilton, who's got nothing really to lose in this situation. He's probably the guy to beat. Well, he is the guy to beat. And it's all on the other guys. It's all on, Bottas, Verstappen. If you really want to throw Leclerc in there, given that he's been pretty honest about how Ferrari don't really seem like they're in a position to challenge, why not? I mean, what I reckon is we'll see Charles often, outperforming the car. Whether he'll be able to do it this weekend. He was strong here last year, but he's already downplayed the fact that he might not be as strong as he was last year here. So, don't know. Just, I guess we'll see when it comes to qualifying what happens. And Sebastian Vettel as well, with what was said, what he said yesterday, because you forget that, this is the first time we kind of heard from him directly since the announcement that he won't be at Ferrari. Here's a bit of spice for you. Apparently, there was no negotiation or anything like that. It was, or Ferrari never offered him a contract, according to Seb. It was just a phone call from Mattia Binotto, basically saying, yeah, we're kind of going in a different direction next year, so you're out. Poor Seb, but there'll be a lot for him to, I think, prove as well this year then, so he'll want to get a good start too. I wouldn't really put my money on Seb for the World Championship this year, but, he'll try and want to go out on a high or kicking and screaming, whatever works, as long as, he gets his point across and, Ferrari, I guess they'll never admit they've got egg on their faces, as much as Seb has his shortcomings as well. I think mainly you've got to attribute the downfalls over the last few years to Ferrari, like I've said quite a bit on this podcast, because, Ferrari, yeah. And also Alex Albon too, I think this is his chance to shine too. He's finally had, you could say, more than a proper pre-season, because last year when he made his debut with Toro Rosso, he kind of got plucked in the middle of the pre-season because he was supposed to do Formula E. I wonder how many people remember that, that Albon was going to race for Nissan in Formula E last year before Helmut Marko decided to pick up the phone and say, would you like to come back to the Red Bull? That was not a very good Helmut Marko impersonation. I can do it pretty well, I think. Some people have said, yeah, it's pretty spot on, but, voice, not really. I think you need a few whiskeys or something to get into the get into the groove. But yeah, Albon, proper pre-season this year. He'll be much more relaxed as well, knowing that, he's got his position secure there. He's not, looking over his shoulder or anything. And I don't think any of the Toro Rosso guys, AlphaTauri guys, here we go, this is going to be great. How many times you say Toro Rosso instead of AlphaTauri, and it's funny when you hear people still say Force India instead of Racing Point too, so might as well call Mercedes Tyrrell. No, it's not that bad, but Albon, much more relaxed, not having to look over his shoulder. I don't think any of the Toro, there I did it again, AlphaTauri guys will be, they're not really in a position yet or at the moment to be pushing or knocking on that door. Gasly, obviously, when he went back to Toro Rosso last year, yeah, I can say it that way because they were Toro Rosso last year. When he went back to that team last year, he was a lot stronger, but, it's because he's more comfortable in that car. The Red Bull car didn't really suit him. And Danny Kvyat, I don't know whether he's on Helmut Marko's radar to go back to Red Bull, which, is very unfortunate because we did see a lot more of a mature Kvyat last year. I think fatherhood perhaps has mellowed him a little bit as well. But, he was solid last year. Both drivers last year were able to pick up podiums. So, I think Albon definitely a better suit to the Red Bull. We'll see better results from him, and perhaps even this weekend. So close to that podium in Brazil last year, heartbreaking, I guess. With the incident with Lewis Hamilton at the end, but I don't think we're going to see any shortage of podiums for Red Bull and for Albon as well this year, which will be quite important. For their constructors' championship charge as well. And while we're talking about Red Bull quickly, I think they're going to bring up a protest to the FIA over the legality of the DAS system on Mercedes. So, you remember that, Mercedes in testing, they had this thing where, they pull the steering wheel and the axis of the tyre changes, basically saying, what, we're so much better than everyone at the moment, let's start doing some funny stuff. So, I don't even know if we're going to see it this weekend, but if they're going to protest about it, then, might not see it ever again. It was already outlawed for 2021, so if they can try and get him to remove it for this year, that would be something. But hey, what? It's not Formula One without a team kicking up a fuss about something, and go back to last year with the legality of Ferrari's engine and the oil burning that was going on and the little sneaky power boost that they were getting. The FIA basically dismissed that at the start of the year and said, we've come to a private settlement. And it's like, well, what's the private settlement? We want to, as a organisation and as a regulatory body, I think you should be transparent with the results of those findings. So basically, it's another case of Ferrari international assistance, as a lot of people like to say. I don't think it's that case, but it's one for the conspiracy theorists to slash each other's throats over. But that'll be interesting to see how that pans out as well. And then moving on from that, if the testing form translates, then Racing Point should be the best of the rest, and possibly even on for a podium threat, given that they've got the Mercedes engine, they look really strong, power circuits and all that sort of stuff. And basically, well, not just the Mercedes engine, they're running a copy of last year's Mercedes, basically. So, wouldn't be surprised if you got Sergio Perez up there on the podium, Lance Stroll up there as well. There'll be a bit more. I'll talk about Racing Point a bit later. But McLaren, they had, season best result here last year for Lando Norris. He was stellar at the start of the race. He was, dicing with Sebastian Vettel, which was great. And then I think he had a battle with Kimi Raikkonen throughout the race too. Carlos Sainz was in there as well in the points. So there'll be a pick for the points. And as I say in, points later on, that, I reckon McLaren will be, again, team who finishes fourth in the Constructors' Championship. Alfa Romeo as well last year scored points here, double points, which was good for them. I think it was Giovinazzi's first points in Formula One as well, so I think they're going to maybe struggle a bit more this year, but, who knows, how the form from testing translates. Renault had a shocking year last year, and you'd think that with all the upgrades that they have brought for this race, or these two races, this year, that they would do a lot better. And I guess, they're going to have a big point to prove as well this year because, basically they've had their star driver, Daniel Ricciardo, give them a kick in the nads and say, what, I don't think you guys are capable of delivering what you promised, so I'm going to go off to your competitors. But, given the fact that Renault are getting government assistance there in France, they've basically got the support of the French government behind them. They're going to have to deliver, they're going to have to deliver one way or another. Otherwise, there's going to have to be questions asked of the team's management, and I'm looking firmly at Cyril Abiteboul, Jerome Stoll, guys like that. They've been in charge this whole time since Renault came back in 2016, and what have they got to show for it exactly? You know, the 3-year plan that they outlined back then, it's been, 4 years now? And, you know, we don't think they're going to be world beaters this year, but last year, them going backwards, they had 2 great drivers as well. It doesn't quite add up, so there's going to be a lot of questions asked, I reckon, and someone's got to ask those questions of their management. It's not just a case of, it's all the driver's fault, or it's all his fault, it's all that fault. Very, very bad culture, I think, amongst those guys at Enstone. But, you know, that wasn't always the case either. So that's the sad thing as well, I think, because I was a real fan of the Enstone team back in their Lotus days. Eric Boulier there as well with Kimi Räikkönen and all. But yeah, if they don't deliver this year, there's got to be questions asked, I think, of their management, because I don't think they can still go in the same direction and expect any better than what they're showing at the moment. Haas as well, you know, they qualified real strongly last year, but their race, they just basically ended up in the boondocks. There's no kind of way of putting it, and I think this was the race that Kevin Magnussen, you know, punched a hole in the wall or something, and Gunther Steiner was going to chase him down in the paddock that they showed in the Netflix show. I can't remember. It might have been here or Silverstone, but there was, you know, a lot of tension between those guys or that team because of how things were going. So, yeah, no surprise at that. And, yeah, good to hear that they've got the Netflix cameras there in Austria as well. So we, regardless of, you know, the pandemic, we're still going to get a season 3 of our Drive to Survive next year, early next year, I hope. So that'll be exciting to see. But getting into the key questions now, you know, basically talked about it for the whole time I've been on air. First one, it's got to be, you know, will Hamilton match Schumacher? You know, I wrote back in March as well that Hamilton basically was chasing greatness this year, and, you know, he's on the precipice of the 7th world title, but not only that, chasing the 91st career win as well, which, you know, is the all-time record at the moment set by Michael Schumacher. Again, it's one of those things where you didn't expect, you know, after Schumacher set those records back, you know, 2004 was his last championship, and then his last win came in 2006. You didn't expect him to, or didn't expect anyone else to come and usurp that anytime soon. Though here we have Lewis, you know, 2020, able to get that 7th world title. So it's going to take a lot of beating this year. Wins might be a bit difficult this year. He's on 84. He's got to chase 91. So do the math. That's 7 wins he's away. So if we've got a shortened season, it's going to take a really dominant season from Hamilton to be able to equal that record and break it. Like if it was a normal 22 race season, that would be pretty easy. You know, I say easy with tongue in cheek. You know, winning a Formula 1 Grand Prix is not easy and never will be. So, you know, I think if we're only going to have, you know, 8 to 15 races, something like that, it might be a bit difficult unless, of course, the form is dominant, which, you know, it could very well be given Mercedes preseason testing form. You know, there's also a point to prove for Mercedes as well, given that, you know, they've got the impending departure of their engine chief, Andy Cowell. That was announced a couple of weeks ago. He's been, you know, the architect of basically the world-beating Mercedes powertrain and the work he's done at the HPP group for a number of years now, even when they were in partnership with McLaren. And, of course, you know, the speculation around Toto Wolff's future as well. So targeting a 7th consecutive Constructors' Championship too, something that's not been achieved yet. Even the most dominant Ferrari era with Schumacher couldn't do 7 Constructors' Championships in a row. So, yeah, I reckon, and this is not really a safe bet either. I think it's a they'll comfortably do it, if anything. And the way that Hamilton is at the moment too, you know, with his activist involvements, his activism and all that, I think there's no better time for him to, you know, use that energy to deliver a 7th World Championship. So I think when he's in that sort of headspace, he's going to be pretty unbeatable. And that's just the sign of, you know, an amazing driver, you know, greatest of all time. And I think with that 7th World Championship, you can firmly put that GOAT label onto Hamilton. Onwards, and who will be the credible challenger? So, yeah, I think, you can pretty much say maybe Hamilton will definitely win the championship this year, but I think there will be more of a credible challenge from Red Bull this year. Unfortunately, Ferrari have already ruled them out. Leclerc was great last year, but I don't think this year will be his year either. And even though they're going to have upgrades in Hungary, it will be too late because every race will count. So with the shortened season, I think Red Bull Verstappen will be a lot stronger. Look at the first 3 races I've said already. 2 races in Austria, 1 in Hungary. Should suit him like a T. So if not leading the World Championship, I reckon he will come out of these 3 races with at least 1 win under his belt and should be on the podium for the other races. So I think Verstappen will definitely be able to push a lot longer, and that's what we haven't seen from him, is that to be able to sustain a whole season's worth of a championship challenge, and whether it's to do with his own form or car consistency as well, reliability. I think this year, with how many gains Honda have made, and you forget the position Honda was in, only a couple of years ago when they had that split with McLaren, and it was just all a disaster. Now look at them, they're in a position to fight for a championship. It's really good to see they've been able to rebound that way. So Verstappen, I think, will be the only credible driver, or driver to mount a credible challenge outside of Mercedes. Bottas has got to be there or thereabouts. It's kind of frustrating, I guess, that he only gets 1 year contract extensions and everything, and basically he is a role player in that team. Unfortunately, the perfect backup to Hamilton, but a very handy backup too. Like, he's not, I guess, as I wouldn't put him in the same boat as Barrichello, but if, say Hamilton has a difficult season, Bottas will be the one to step up at Mercedes, or, even just individual race weekends, Bottas will be the guy to pick up the pieces, as we did see last year. And I think, he's probably in a better headspace too coming into this year. But again, where Hamilton's at, very difficult to see anyone beat him. Class B as well, who's going to win that battle? I said, McLaren, just purely on their driver lineup and how consistent they are. The car better this year than it was last year, which is the feedback from both Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. Obviously, Sainz is Ferrari bound next year, but McLaren have said that they're going to keep an open book approach with him, which is going to be good too. It's, again, really sad, given that, there's no real... There wasn't, any acrimony or anything between the two parties, but the Sainz and McLaren fit was so good, with him and his Muppet friend, as he likes to call him. So cute. Between the relationship between he and Norris as well is so good. It's kind of sad that we're not going to see that next year, but they're going to want to go out on a high, and I think they're going to be the right team to go back-to-back for 4th place in the championship. And why I don't think Racing Point will do it, well, it's purely because, I think driver consistency, we haven't really seen that from Lance Stroll at the moment. Hopefully, maybe with a competitive car this year, we do see a lot more consistency from him. But I reckon, Perez will be hoovering up the points wherever possible, can get the podiums if the car is up there. And what's also going to work to their benefit too is the fact that, we're going to have basically a freeze on, major development changes between this year and next. So if they start off this year with a good car, they're going to take that into next year as well, and whatever developments they do bring will be quite crucial to keeping him there. So I guess it all depends on how consistent Racing Point's lineup will be, but I think McLaren over a whole season might be able to deliver that 4th place that Racing Point won't. Renault and AlphaTauri, they'll be thereabouts, but again, you want those results from Renault, because kicking the nads from Ricciardo to say, I don't think you guys are quite there, but it also is going to be a test of Renault's management, as I said too, and I think more people should start talking about it as well, because what's the if it's not working, then it starts from the top, So, and you see other teams, whether it's, in other codes of sport, if there's things that are not working, there's usually changes from the top, if that means sacking a coach or, making management changes and all that. So, yeah, I'd like to see a bit of pressure on Cyril Abiteboul if possible this year, if they're not doing well. Next question, will the calendar see further impact from the pandemic? Yes, I think. We've got those 8 races obviously locked away. We should see some new races hopefully come into play after Monza in September, so like some Mugello, Imola being talked about. I think Mugello has pretty much been guaranteed or given a guaranteed yes, and also the Algarve circuit in Portugal, which is really exciting. Even Mugello, they both are excellent circuits that have driven on some games in the past, and I think they will do really well in F1. But moving outside of Europe, I think, will be the big challenge at the moment. So when you look at what the situation is in Asia, they want to go to China. Singapore is off. Japan, you'd say that's off too. So, is it worth it? Because, I think that there was a second wave in Beijing that's going on at the moment. So they're going to have to catch up with that to be able to make it safe. And also the Americas, again, just doesn't look like, they've got on top of their situation at the moment with the pandemic. So, and with all the other stuff going on too, might be not the best place to go. And Canada, I thought, you would have ruled Canada out because of the cold weather, but hey, they might still go there. Be good though, like the Canadian Grand Prix whenever it's on, but whether it's impacted by cold weather and stuff like that, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, the season should still finish, in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. Whether we have to do back-to-back races there remains to be seen. There were talks about, Sochi doing back-to-back races as well. I don't know what I'll need to stay attentive to back-to-back races at Sochi. It's such a boring event. I'm sure many of you will agree with me on that too. And then finally, will all 10 teams make it to 2021? So I've, made mention of it previously as well about the troubles that are currently engulfing the likes of Williams. Then only a couple of weeks ago, McLaren as well announced that, they've had a substantial loss, Australian $270 million, which is £150 million. They've laid off about 1,200 staff as well across the McLaren group. But, they've secured a loan for £150 million. I forgot what their losses were, but yeah, they've been able to secure a loan from the National Bank of Bahrain, which is part owned actually by the company that is a majority stakeholder, Mumtalakat. So, but yeah, they're looking to offload some shares or do some rearranging of their shareholdings. Williams, of course, open to a sale or a partial sale of their team to secure their future, and I think it's just bad timing with the pandemic. I'm sure everyone was looking forward to, or these teams in particular were looking forward to, the budget cap that was going to come in next year, $145 million US, 211 Australian million, and the sliding scale too, because a team like Williams, if they do finish last in the championship this year, they're going to get more time in the wind tunnel next year, which, when you look at it as a long-term or mid to long-term prospect, it will be a lot more better for them in the next few years, rather than, they're going to be operating at a loss and this and that. So, and even a team like Haas, who basically they've said, or Gene Haas has said, that he doesn't want to be in the sport if it means they're going to continue finishing where they are. They want to be competitive. Everyone wants to be competitive. So, it's just, we hope that all the teams survive heading into next year, because I think Formula One's going to be better from next year, with all these changes that they're bringing, the budget caps, the sliding scales and all that on the performance and everything too. So as long as they can all get there, I think, that's going to be the challenge, and hopefully they all do that. But I think that's it. I think that's it for Formula One. Geez, 45 minutes worth of F1 chat. And I mean, where am I going to squeeze in this supercar stuff to? Because there's a lot to talk about there as well. Well, there was no better way for supercars to return over the last weekend at Sydney Motorsport Park than a nail-biting battle between Scott McLaughlin and Shane Van Gisbergen, the two Kiwis, the two main protagonists in the championship for the last few years. You know, Ford versus Holden, that rivalry, and only 0.18 seconds difference across the line. So good, you know. That was race 7 on Saturday. I think, yeah, if you want to sum up what supercars is, you just look at that race, you look at that battle between those guys, so close. You know, you had a strong start from McLaughlin in that race. He was on pole position, a bit of concern about his tyres too, and I think tyres was the big talking point over the weekend, and for all the right reasons too, because, you know, Dunlop has basically said we can only manufacture this many tyres per weekend, and that it means each team, I think it's like 20 sets or something per weekend, putting the onus on how tyres are managed. So definitely not a gimmick, it's all organic, but it's a variable that created the surprise element that I kept talking about in the build-up. You know, I said, expect some surprises this weekend, expect some surprises, and we got that with the way that the results panned out. So basically, yeah, you know, the first race, people want to start off on a high, you know, they'll use their good tyres and everything. You got to basically, change a minimum of 2 tyres per race, in the single stop that they have. There's no refueling. You saw some teams changing 3 tyres because, as far as how many, you know, when you look at the strategy and the time lost in the pit lane with the 6 people that you have allowed to work on the car, one of them is the air spike man, which, you know, on the right side of the car where the fuel goes and the air spike is, you know, he's in the way while he's doing his job. So for the 2 people on each side who have to change a tyre, they're going to have to then walk around him to be able to change a tyre if they're, you know, changing front or a rear. So that's why, and it also worked because the loaded side where the tyre hurts more at this circuit at Sydney Motorsport Park is on the left side. So, or have I just got that wrong? It's the left side where you have the air spike man, and the right side is the more loaded side. So you change 2 tyres on that side. You saw pretty much everyone doing that, and then if they could, they would change all 4 tyres or just 3 with only the one on the left side where the air spike man is. I had to visualize that quickly. You know, I'm like, you know, where's pit exit? It's a anti-clockwise track, so it's going to be on the left hand side where the fuel filler and the air spike is. So it was very, very mixed that way. The rapid fire sessions too kept everyone on their toes, so it was good. It was old school with the lack of data with the lack of data as well. It made the drivers feel more like old school drivers where, you know, you just basically jump in the car, you give verbal feedback and basically debrief like that with your engineer, but there was no like poring over data or anything like that. You know, the only one doing that was Neil Crompton in the Hino hub, which has become, you know, a bit of a cult thing, I think you could say, between us. Who was it? You know, I think Josh Kerr was saying it was like a shrine. We should have a shrine to the Hino hub. I think that's a bit, maybe a little bit creepy, but hey, you know, I've seen worse. Back to the racing. So great race. First up, you know, McLaughlin came in early, lap 15, made the pit stop. Van Gisbergen stayed out a bit later, lap 19, and made his pit stop then. And then basically they were racing each other to the end of the 32-lap race. So, yeah, McLaughlin getting the biscuits at the end of them, extending his lead in the championship too. And it was just a great race. Great way to get supercars back on the road. Race 8, a bit different again. So the first race on Sunday, it all depended on who had what tyre in the bank. So and also the sacrifice that teams and drivers have got to make during one of those races or during one of those stints, that they've got to take on a ordinary set of tyres. Which is, my way of saying used set of tyres. The fact that you're making a pit stop doesn't mean that you're going to be pitting for fresh tyres. You might have to just put an old set back on there. You're just basically serving that pit stop. So, like Scotty, Shane, Van Gisbergen, Fabian Coulthard as well, who had a miserable weekend, you got to say. They all had ordinary rubber in race 8, but guys like Nick Percat, David Reynolds, Cameron Waters, they all had fresh sets, so that's why we saw them run a bit stronger in that second race. Jamie Whincup was on pole. It was his 500th race in Supercars 2, joining a very elite club. Guys like Russell Ingall in there, Todd Kelly, Rick Kelly, I think, Garth Tander as well, Craig Lowndes. So on pole for that. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to take the biscuits. We like biscuits, don't we? Delicious bickies. He wasn't able to take the biscuits at the end of that one. It was Nick Percat who he was celebrating his own milestone, 200th race for him. He started in 6th. And the difference again came down to strategy, because Whincup took 2 tyres in the pit stop while Percat took all 4 because he had them available. And it wasn't long after that he was able to hunt down and pass Whincup on, I think it was lap 22. So first win for someone other than DJR Team Penske or Red Bull Holden Racing Team in 30 races. So you have to go back to the Melbourne 400, the Grand Prix support round last year, back in March last year, where Chaz Mostert won for Tickford. So a strong run for those teams, the juggernauts, you got to say. And Brad Jones Racing, I think 2016 at Winton was the last time they were able to win a race, and that was when Tim Slade dominated the weekend, taking 2 from 2. And for Percat himself, first win for him since Adelaide 2016 as well, where he won that strange wet race for Lucas Dumbrell Motorsports. So it was such a feel-good, we had this strong first race between, Shane and Scotty, battle between them. Then you had this second race where you had someone other than the 2 top teams win a race as well. And Nick Percat, who's a favourite, I guess, in the paddock, such a cool guy, take the win. And then the the third and final race, I'll get to that, you had Lee Holdsworth put on a masterclass, carved up the field, kept his powder dry throughout the weekend, and was able to get on the podium, finish second behind Scott McLaughlin. So, if the race was a couple of laps longer, I reckon Lee had the better tyres to be able to catch up to Scotty. In the end, it was, I think, 1.5 seconds difference between the two. But going back to race 8, getting a bit ahead of myself, but going back to race 8, it was a great battle for third. We had Scott McLaughlin there, Cam Waters, David Reynolds, Chaz Mostert. Mostert and McLaughlin had the better tyres in that situation, but just the way that they were kind of, two abreast, behind two abreast, heading into those corners. I think there was a bit of contact between Waters and McLaughlin, left a bit of an invoice on the Shell V power car on the rear bumper, but it was just fascinating. It was just like, biting on with the nails off your fingers, sitting at the edge of your seat, maybe yelling at the TV. It just depends on how excited you get about these things. But seriously, it was so close. It was so exciting. And then, of course, McLaughlin ended up on the podium there and, had a perfect record over the weekend for podiums. 2 wins and a podium. Whincup, 3 podiums for him, which, keeps him in a good position in the championship too. But, going on to Lee, how he went on in race 9. So started from 4th, good start, but then dropped to P6. Ran long to lap 18 to make his pit stop, and then from 7th, when he rejoined, he was able to basically just scythe past the field. Todd Hazelwood, who had a good start to the race, unfortunately, he wasn't able to convert what could have been the podium. Van Gisbergen, Mark Winterbottom, and David Reynolds, all just easy meat for Holdsworth, and then, of course, Whincup, the final victim for him. For P2, so Whincup finishing 3rd in that race, and we've said this a lot about Lee Holdsworth, where he's such a good driver, but just for whatever reason the car's not there. And I think now that Tickford are getting a bit more consistent across all their cars, we've seen Davison on the podium when he was there, but you saw, Cam Waters up there, Adelaide this year, and then now you got Lee getting on the podium, first solo podium for him at Tickford as well. So good result for him, and just good racing all round over the weekend. I just can't speak any higher of it. And looking at the championship standings, Scotty leading it, but 49 points, that's nothing over Jamie Whincup. So, and behind him, 142 points, Chaz Mostert in third still. So even though he wasn't on the podium this weekend, he was still consistent with his results and still within that crucial window he needs to be. Then Cam Waters, 163 points behind in fourth, and David Reynolds sitting fifth with 182 points in arrears. Shane van Gisbergen, though, down in eighth, and he's 221 points behind, which is almost a round's worth of points, because you get 300 per round, and that's because he had a DNF next to his name in Adelaide. So bit of a fight back involved for Gizzy, but like he did in the E Series, he was able to come back from a few DNF results to win the championship. So maybe that might be a guide to look at for the championship this year. But again, at a circuit like Sydney Motorsport Park, I couldn't have expected any less from McLaughlin. It's a type of circuit that he's really strong at, and looks like we're heading back there in July 17 to 18. It was meant to be the weekend for the Winton SuperSprint, but that's not going to happen now, thank you to the lovely people of Melbourne, of which I am a Melburnian. Not so proud anymore, I got to say, because the second wave is kind of just run amok. I mean, it's concentrated. That's the good thing about it. It's all in specific areas which have now gone into lockdown. But as a result of that, the reaction of the country, you got to say, has been quite negative towards us. The plans to reopen the borders between Victoria and South Australia on the 20th of July, they've gone. They're not doing any of that. And in fact, anyone driving around with Victorian number plates in South Australia at the moment, they're getting their cars vandalised and stuff like that. And same thing happening in New South Wales too. The same state, yes, New South Wales, the same state that let a cruise ship full of sick people in. Let's not forget about that so quickly. And Queensland as well, I think, and this is the reason where Winton's had to be cancelled, is because Queensland have, I guess, made their border rules a lot more strict, saying that if you're going to leave Queensland and then come back, or go to Victoria and come back, you're going to have to see out a 14-day isolation period once you come back. And obviously you've got drivers who live in Queensland, you've got three teams, who are based out of Queensland as well. There's 3 weeks between the 18th of July, when the event was supposed to finish in Winton, and then the next round in Darwin, and logistically it just was not possible to then go back to Queensland, do your 14 days, and then get ready to go to Darwin. You wouldn't be able to turn the car around because you're all stuck in isolation. So on that basis, they've had to, and I've got to congratulate them for making the decision really quickly. Supercars, they've decided to can Winton, even though Winton is like 200 kilometres away from Melbourne, to the north of Melbourne, so you wouldn't even be coming through Melbourne. But that's the rules. You got to abide by what the government say in these times. So instead, we just got to be appreciative that we're going to have another round of races at Sydney Motorsport Park. So that's going to be 3 rounds this year at Eastern Creek, but they're going to change it. Hopefully the lights will be ready, so we're going to have like a day-nighter style event. So we're going to have a night race on the Saturday, and then Sunday we'll have the 2 other races during the day. Still going to have the support categories as well, which will be exciting because, Super 2, Super 3 combined their grids this year, Carrera Cup and the Toyota 86 Racing Series 2. And they're going to allow fans. That's how good these people in New South Wales have been compared to us naughty Victorians, that they're going to allow possibly up to 10,000 fans to be trackside, obviously with social distancing and everything enforced as well. But they're allowing fans into the footy over there now. And I think in Queensland we saw, a lot more than what we saw in New South Wales. So hey, I guess a reward for them for the fact that they've actually done what they're supposed to. It's so silly. I'm not going to go into all that what's going on here this time. I think we're running out of time anyway on this week's podcast. And quickly, while we talk about support categories, I forgot to mention this when we were doing the F1 stuff, but exciting too that we've got F2 and F3 as well supporting every race so far for the Formula 1 season. And Formula 3 this year I think will be paying a lot more attention because we've got 4 Aussie drivers in there. So got this press release earlier about how exciting it is to have 4 drivers in the category, 30 car field. Oscar Piastri, Kalen Williams, Jack Doohan, of course, son of Grand Prix motorcycle world champion Mick, and Alex Peroni as well, in for another season of F3. And of course, people who know Alex Peroni will probably know him, hopefully for his racing skills, but also probably because the big incident that he had, the big crash that he had at Monza last year where he went airborne, and it was lucky that he was able to walk away from that unharmed. So yeah, 4 young Aussie drivers to get behind, which is really exciting. And of course, Piastri is one who's on Renault's books as well as a junior driver. Jack Doohan, of course, in the Red Bull program too, so maybe another Aussie to come through there. And yeah, Peroni, someone who's obviously going into his second season there at F3, and keep an eye on young Kalen Williams too. So that about wraps it up, I think. Before my voice completely breaks, I've got to say, this cold weather doesn't do much for me, I've got to say. I will complain more about the cold as the year goes on. But hopefully we'll be getting back to warmer days soon. We did pass solstice about a week ago now, so on to bigger and better things. Anyway, thanks guys for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the weekend with the Austrian Grand Prix. Another loaded episode next week, of course, wrapping up this weekend's worth of racing, and then of course previewing the next race in Austria again, the doubleheader. Remember, you can follow us on @HitTheApexMedia. All the tweeting that I'll be doing over the weekend, and get onto the live blog that I'll be on too for the raw.com as well. That's going to be on there. I'll post the link anyway on Twitter once we get to the race start. And then we're basically kind of expanded, I think, with our podcast platforms. We're already on Spotify, Apple, I think we're on Google now, and it'll be on YouTube too in a few hours time after recording. So get onto it, guys, and remember, stay safe, be kind to one another, and let's just enjoy the racing. Ciao.